You're going to see a lot of repetition in themes from some of what we've already discussed, and I was a little bit worried about that when I saw like kind of the lineup and everything. But at the same time, I think the emphasis is very important because a lot of these concepts we really need to be very familiar with and understand and work with. So I'm going to talk about navigating the house, and of course, I would be remiss not to focus in on some of the overarching concepts and theory that are in this line of work. Politics is defined as of or relating to citizens. I've also heard it described as the practice and theory of influencing people on a global, civic, or individual level. Don't confuse this with partisanship. It's much more about relationship. And of course, this is a theme that we've touched on already. So within our organizations, we define certain relationships in a number of ways. Let's say Ryan and I are having a conversation. In that conversation, we are determining how much we tell one another, if we trust one another, if we consider one another to be reasonable or intellectual, or perhaps a certain subject matter they are experts on. Or maybe not so much. We're kind of feeling out our strengths, our weaknesses, and we're determining how to move forward. Those relationships they're pivotal in this environment, and they're pivotal in understanding how to navigate the house because they exist. When you talk about navigating a house, it lends itself to the metaphor of navigating a ship, right? If you're a boat, if you're a captain of a ship and you don't know where the shore is, or if there's an obstruction in the water, or how deep the water is, if you don't understand what's going on around you, then you can't really navigate that ship very well. So it's very important to understand that politics and relationships are at play around you, and to understand how they work so that you know the field of play, and you can strategize to work within them and use them to your advantage rather than have them be something that you cannot pivot around. So of course, we're going to talk a little more about custom and form of the actual House of Representatives. This is, we naturally, within our institutions, whether it's a business or it's a governing body or it's a non-for-profit, we set up hierarchies and we set up ways of doing things. Some of those are very formal, they're written. The House of Representatives adopts rules that it operates under, but there are also rules that are unspoken, and we follow naturally, or we follow because we know that if we don't, we're going to upset one of those relationships or one of those power brokers. And so it lends itself to you just kind of have to deal with it. So some of the more formal ones in the House are, of course, the committee processes and that structure. We'll discuss that a little bit more here in a little bit. And then, of course, the delineation of power. So we decide by rule who has power by setting up that there is a speaker. And that speaker determines who the committee chairmen are. And that speaker determines who the majority members of that committee are going to be. And we have a minority floor leader. And that minority floor leader gets to decide who the minority members of that committee, what that committee makeup is going to look like. So we outline that. And we also define a chairman and naturally a ranking minority member. It's important to understand those things are at play because they lend themselves to other kind of written customs or unwritten customs that the House will eventually follow. My presentation is going to move on a little bit quicker than perhaps some of the others, but we've heard some of these concepts already. This is the proverbial table that you want to be sitting at, because if you're not sitting at the table, then you're on the menu, as they say. So I will stress, don't leave the table. Don't ever leave the table. I'm going to talk about committees, and this, I touched on it briefly just a moment ago, but I'm going to talk about, there's a nuance happening in the House of Representatives right now, which is kind of turning some of the standards that we expect. We are, humans naturally are averse to change, but there's a lot of change happening in the House of Representatives right now, so it's kind of exciting. but it's also, there's a lot of uncertainty going on with how the process is going to work, if it's going to be better, or if it's going to lend itself to more, maybe political persuasion or more influence, undue influence. So it's going to be interesting to kind of hash that out. So one of the kind of unwritten rules, although it seems a little obvious, is that the chairman of the committee generally has full discretion. If they don't want to hear a bill, they don't have to. They may, Representative Curtman, as chair of his the Committee on Government Efficiency, has kind of adopted a less formal policy, or rather, it is a formal policy, which is not written, but we hear all bills more often than not. So that's if it's going to come here, it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican, we're going to hear your idea. Not every chairman has to do that, and so it's important to understand that the chair has complete discretion. It's also important to understand that it's generally accepted and expected that you vote with either the chair, if you're a member of the majority, or with the minority ranking member, if you are a member of the minority. That becomes a lot more important on the appropriations committees, where the minority members are basically going to vote no, even if they love, so if they got certain things put into the bill and they got some of the funding that they wanted, they're still going to vote against it because it's kind of expected that you vote with the ranking member and they are going to oppose the majority's budget because we're full Republicans, right? So this new change that I was talking about is that a new layer was implemented in the House, and so we now have a tiered committee system. In previous years, we had all the committees had kind of the same standing. They may have been called different things, special standing committees or regular standing committees and all that. But if they got sent a bill, they could pass it, they could move it out, and it would then go to the Rules Committee, and everything went to the Rules Committee, and it created this large bottleneck. They have tried, in their effort to stymie that a little bit, the new speaker has decided that a tiered system might work a little better. And so there are select committees, there are only a few of them, and every standing committee reports to one of those. And so the select committee has a defined number of committees that report to it every single time. So there is a pyramid that is static. It's not like if you're in the Committee on Government Efficiency, it may get reported to a different select committee. Ours is always going to go to general laws every time. And there's 3 other committees that are kind of similar in scope or similar in realm of policy, and everything's going to go to general laws. The Select Committee on Budget, all the appropriations committees always refer upstream to it. It's going to be interesting to kind of figure out how this is going to work, politically speaking, if that's going to be an effective system, because when they were pitching this idea to members of the House, they basically said, well, the select committees, yes, they naturally have more power because everything has to go through them, and they can take control of your bill. So as a chair before, your bill was yours, and you moved it to the floor, and if you got it there, it's still yours. But now you have another layer, so there's less authority at the standing level. But they designed the select committees in such a way that every member that's a chair of a standing committee is on the select committee that they report to. So the theory is, if the select committee chairman steamrolls the standing committee chairman, that they will kind of gather together and say, we're not going to, you got to work with us. So we're not just going to send you stuff and then you fundamentally change it, even though you have the authority to. I don't know if that's going to be how it works, but that's the idea. Of course, theory and in practice, 2 very different things. Another very important nuance of this new system, the standing committees can amend, but they cannot offer a committee substitute. We've talked previously about committee substitutes. That's an entirely new bill. It may be very similar to the old bill, but you can change just about anything you want to in there and have it do fundamentally different things. An amendment a much more tailored way of changing a bill. And so at the standing committee level, you now can only amend, so you can make minor changes, and the select committee has to approve all of those amendments. So you can, if you're a sponsor of a bill and you get a bill into a standing committee where you have a strong relationship with that chair, and you say, I filed this, I've learned more about this topic, I need to change it this way, this way, and this way, they allow you to pass those amendments in their committee, make those changes. When they send it up to the select committee, you have lost total control at that point, unless you have that same kind of defined relationship with that select committee chair, because they can say, I like your amendment number 1 and 2, but I don't like 3, and I'm not going to take it. So if that one was important to you, it's going to add a new layer of you better get it right the first time and not have a whole lot of changes. So I think we're going to see more bills getting withdrawn, and they're going to start over with them so that they get them right, so they don't have to kind of give up that authority. They don't have to risk it. Is that coffee?
Yes.
It's, I think one of the technical aspects of the committees that's important to understand is that generally speaking, a committee will always meet at the same time on the same day of the week. So like our committee on government efficiency meets at noon on Mondays. And if we can't really deviate from that without the speaker's permission. So we don't just get to, go have a hearing any old time we want to. The speaker kind of designates, here's your time to meet. You get it done then, or you wait till next week. So that draws out that process. I think that's very key. You can sometimes get a little wiggle room in there. We just noticed that for a 2 o'clock hearing next Monday because we're having a technical session, so it's not a big deal to move things around. But they generally won't allow you to have more than your defined number of slots every week. So you can't just have, well, I'm going to have 2 or 3 hearings this week. You get your one shot that week, so you better get it right.
I just got a question on the select committees. Does a professional lobbyist, do they have access to those committee members?
Oh, sure.
Same as we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
They develop
Everybody
relationships so
yeah.
they can kind of manipulate that bill on those committees.
That's why I wanted to kind of start with and preface with that, the idea of relationship.
Right.
Because I can outline to you how things are supposed to work and what the rules say and how the process generally works. But relationships are what help sidestep those things. Or they throw up roadblocks where you might not want them. Or if you're lobbying against something as a citizen activist, it may be to your benefit to throw up a roadblock.
So the sponsor of that bill loses control that bill, but the lobbyists still have the relationship advantage. They can talk to the members.
But so do the members of the House. The members of the House are getting to know each other and forming relationships and kind of defining what their expertise is. And so people are still having those interactions amongst themselves. So I guess I'll answer that with yes, but with the kind of
I've seen examples of it, following bills through the process, and I see them start off when they're first presented, and as they go through committee, it just changed completely.
Sure. And the old process lent itself to that. One of the unwritten rules, kind of customs of the House, was you had 3 committee slots. So if you were a committee chairman, because there were 50 committees, the speaker kind of set this unwritten rule that each committee only gets 3. That way they can help manage their own workflow. They're not getting 10 bills from every committee a week. They know that they've got 3 max out of a committee per year.
Okay.
And so that was an unwritten rule that we all understood.
Okay.
They can tell you, yeah, you can pass this one, we won't count against you or something like that, but you had to get permission.
Sure.
And it's one of those things, you had to have that relationship with the Speaker's office and, in order to get that flexibility. Otherwise, you would upset the chain of command and you can really...
You got to prioritize your bills.
Yeah. And so that meant that committee chairs often looked at their 15 or 20 bills that had been sent to them and they condensed them all into one big omnibus.
Oh, wow.
So that's why you've seen in the last several years you see a lot of omnibus legislation. It wasn't just because people were trying to add stuff
Sure.
left and right just to get it done. There was a committee process that lends itself to encouraging folks to have their one piece of legislation that they really wanted, and they wanted it to be by itself. And then they had, maybe 2 omnibus slots.
Yeah, I've seen that, and I've always wondered why that happened.
Yeah, and that's going to be different this year, because again, the standing committees at the bottom of the pyramid can't do House committee substitutes. So you can't just kind of make sausage the same way. It's a different process. Now the select committees can.
Okay.
And so that's why we got to consider, well, do you have a relationship with that committee chairman? Are they going to take your bill and send it out clean, the way you want it?
Right.
Or are they going to put, 10 other pieces of legislation and smack them all together and then kick them out? They don't have to. We don't have these caps anymore. But it'll be interesting to see how it actually, in practice, moves forward. Again, it's kind of exciting in the sense that maybe we're going to have so many omnibus bills where people have to take votes that have contradictory messages in them.
Right.
Or, maybe you've got some really good pro-liberty, language in there, but then kind of tucked in at the bottom, or we're going to subsidize the dairy industry. So this may lend itself to, it can be good, it can be bad. It's going to,
So again, it reverts back to what you guys said initially, previously, the relationship that you develop with these committee members, the chairs. You're kind of the professional lobbyist and the citizen lobbyist or activists are kind of at war with each other in regards to what the level of relationship they got with those chairs.
Maybe war is not the right way to describe it, but there certainly is a struggle. There is certainly a game of strategy that is happening all the time on all different fronts in Jeff City and back home in districts. So yes, there's always, and so that's why I stress the relationships component, because if you destroy a relationship with somebody or you remove your credibility on an item, then you have effectively ruined your opinion of what is good policy.
You killed the bill.
It's done. And so it's very important to maintain, the seat at the table. And so that's why I stress the relationship.
If you behave, say, in a negative manner on this bill, if you got other bills in the future, you kind of ruined your credibility in that effort as well.
It's not just your single. If you do something that harms your image on a certain issue, there's a famous saying, I think it's a poem by John Donne, "No man is an island entire of itself."
Yeah.
If you ruin your credibility on one thing, there's a trickle down effect, to any other issue that you're trying to touch. So it's very important to maintain, decency and an aura of respect and consideration for people with opposing viewpoints of you, because they may, you can persuade somebody to be less hostile to your issue by just having a conversation. I remember one year we were filing a bill. I'm sorry, we'll get to your question in just a second. I was working for my very first state representative, and we filed a bill, and it had to do with embryo adoptions. So we have all these frozen embryos out there, and they just sit there. And there was a big policy question of what happens if the parents die. Is that a life, or is it property, or how do you view it? So we were trying to file a bill that would help those embryos be adopted by parents that wanted to raise them to have more children. And the Catholic community was very upset about it. And so they killed the bill over in the Senate. But they didn't come to talk to us about it first. When we went and engaged with them, this was a few days left in session, so the damage had already been done, but they said, okay, we'll back down from our position because now we understand where you're coming from, and we'll be neutral from here on out. Now, they had already effectively killed the bill because we had 2 days left in session. But you can disarm folks by maintaining a positive relationship and a dialogue with people. So it's very important. Again, I'll mention the table. You got to be sitting at the table at all times. And so yes, the relationship, that component is key. It's a make or break idea. Sorry.
Well, my question question kind of goes along with this, so I'm sitting at the table, but how, maybe I missed this, if you have covered it already, and I apologize.
No.
But, how is it determinate, how is the determination made who gets to sit on this election?
So the speaker controls, I'm going to mention, I'll be talking about leadership here in just a second. But on the House side, we've kind of already alluded to it. The speaker has not absolute power, but it's pretty dang near close to it. The speaker, I'll go ahead and jump ahead a little bit. The speaker, by rule, so we adopt the rules at the beginning of every General Assembly. The speaker, by rule, has the power to appoint committee chairmen, all of them, put the name the majority members, assign your office or disassign your office, assign your parking space or disassign your office space, sign off on all expenditures of the House, approve all staff. So if the speaker wants you fired, you can get fired. If you're in my shoes, it's not something that's done frequently, but it certainly could be done. That, you know, if I said the wrong thing to the wrong person, it could literally mean that I'm excused from the building. So the speaker has an immense amount of, it's not always exercised, but it's present and it's known. And so it establishes kind of what you say and what you don't say, and how you act and how you don't act, and that sort of thing. So, did that cover your?
Yes.
Good. So, that working? So, also at the table on the House side, leadership is going to be very important on the House side. Because the speaker has so much power, you're expected to kind of fall in line in a lot of ways. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying, in large part, you're expected to vote with the speaker or with the caucus and stand together. As I mentioned, the speaker has near absolute power, but some of that power is relinquished, particularly to the floor leader. The floor leader has control over the bill calendars. And so we've already alluded to this on the Senate side as well. Once that bill, there's actually a bill jacket, and it's the physical bill. And when you file a bill, it gets created and it goes to the speaker's office, and they assign it to a committee, and they take that physical bill jacket and they take it to the chair. And I think Chris was talking about this. You know, he went down and asked for the bill back. He was literally asking for the actual physical bill. And so whatever goes in that jacket is what, if you get sued saying something's unconstitutional, that's what they're looking at, what's in there and what process it went through. Did you get the right number of votes and the constitutional majorities that you needed, and so on and so forth. So that bill jacket is very important. And once you get it on the floor leader is in charge of that bill jacket, and they have it in their office. And so, and you can't get it back. And if they want to hold on to it indefinitely, they will. So again, it's very important to make sure that when it comes to the leadership of the House, that you make sure that you're not on that radar in a bad way, or if you're on the radar, it's in a good way. Because they don't always focus in on everything, but if they want to, they can do considerable damage to your agenda if they so choose. The other leadership positions aren't nearly as powerful, but since they are kind of vicariously members of leadership, they have a spot at that table use as well, and your speaker and your floor leader will count on them to help rally the troops and keep power consolidated. And so their issues are going to be important. And if they don't like something, it's very easy for them to say, hey, I'd rather you not hear this bill. We were talking about paper ballots earlier. You know, I'd rather you not discuss that one, or rather not discuss the bill on, privacy amendment for, X bill about body cameras. So it's very important to know who the leadership in the House are, more particularly the majority party than the minority, because again, if they choose to focus on your issue, that can be very good and that can be very bad in the same way. And then there's, of course, the lobby corps. So I've spent a little bit of time talking about the actual standards in the house and the rules of the house and kind of the way we do things by custom or, you know, more formally we've written down. But the lobby corps is constantly working on relationships so that they can obstruct or deconstruct obstructions. And so it's important to know that they're out there doing that. And it's important to be one of them. I've listed, in fact, at the bottom here, I've included the party apparatus has its agenda, grassroots advocacy groups have an agenda, and the media has an agenda, and everybody's speaking maybe in different ways. Maybe you're directly forming a relationship, maybe you're writing something in an editorial and you're shaping somebody's opinion that way. Maybe you're writing on a blog, or maybe you're, you know, hosting a website and communicating in a variety of platforms. You know, this is the activity in the house that can make something happen or kill something, you know, in an instant. So regardless of what procedures are in place and what's written in a rule book, if you have strong relationships, you can help move things forward or help stop things. And I think Jim's going to talk more about stopping things here in a little bit. And so I've kind of harped on the relationships quite a bit. We've all mentioned it, but it's very, very key. One final thought. There are two words on the screen here, and one of them is more important than the other, in my opinion. The second one, servants. All of your elected officials are public servants. And there are two ways to treat them: poorly or not so poorly. You know, or you know, treat them well or treat them not so well. It's in my opinion that you get a better work product, you get a better rapport, you get a better outcome if you treat a public servant with decency and with respect and admiration, even when you're disagreeing with them. Because, you know, if you, Chris has mentioned it, you know, it's come up several times. If you treat somebody as a staff member or an elected official in a negative light, it doesn't just stay there. They have friends, they have, you know, they have their own spheres of influence, and word gets around, and so it's a very damaging prospect to go down the road of talking about threats and other things, and ineffective lobbying. So I would caution you, and I would urge that even whenever you disagree with somebody, that you do it from that aura of decency and respect. So.
Yeah, I'd like to put a fine point on that. For us that are Christians, we don't often think how Scripture speaks into this debate. The Romans 13 says that a civil magistrate, the king, is a deacon. He's an official, he's an office holder by God's design. And so when we go in and talk to our elected representatives, we may not agree with them, but they are there by God's design, and we have to show them that respect.
Yeah. And it's important not to take that, you know, that sometimes gets manipulated into, well, they need to be catered to and, you know, and fawned over. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just being decent people. So I would just encourage you to look at your activism and your lobbying as an act of grace rather than one of volatility. Fair enough?
Good.
All right. That's it.
Is that it? Any other questions for Sean or anybody else?
All right. We got a couple more things.
Quick question on the select committees. Do they go through the hearing process as well, or is it just an executive action?
That's actually a very good point, and I'm glad that you raised it. I don't think that they're going to have a public hearing in the same sense as the standing committee will have public testimony and testimony for and against and the public input. I believe that, from what I've understood, that it's just going to be an up or down, both executive session style. And I failed to mention the Rules Committee still exists, whereas everything used to get sent to Rules and there was a big bottleneck. Rules still exists kind of off to the side, and Rules is going to make sure that consent bills, which are non-controversial and don't cost anything, that they actually are non-controversial and don't cost anything before they send them to the majority leader's office to sit on the calendar. And I've also been told that Rules may also very well be used as a death committee, to kill bills that they don't want to be heard. So keep an eye out on the Rules Committee, because it's not nearly as powerful as it used to be, but it still is going to have some, the capability to do some damage if it so chooses. So yeah.
Okay, so I have a couple questions. One, if a bill comes over from the Senate and goes then to a House committee, it'll go to a regular House committee, then it too will go to a select committee.
Yep.
Will it be able to be changed? I guess not if it.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's kind of the whole design and intent, is so that the House can maintain or add its position to that bill. That's another important concept to understand, is that when we go to debate and we've approved something on the House side and on the Senate side and they're different, the House members that kind of sit on that conference committee are expected to maintain the House position, or to at least see to it that certain positions in that bill are maintained. And so there's a natural battle happening between the House and the Senate, where the Senate is trying to maintain its position and the House is maintaining its position, particularly on funding items, but on policy matters as well.
Okay, the other one is just trying to get a better understanding, but if, so these select committees they can kind of put together things, themselves that haven't come together before? I mean, can they create omnibus bills?
Yes, yeah, so they have the power to do House committee substitutes, whereas the standing committees don't.
Okay.
So let's say you have a bill come up from our Government Efficiency Committee, and then you have another committee that also reports to general laws. Maybe the topic is loosely related, and so the select committee chair may very well want to marry those two and send them forward for a number of reasons. Maybe they like both issues and they would rather just do it in one vote instead of having two. It's easier to do. The fewer votes you have, the easier it is to do, right? So that's why I think that standing committees are going to try to do fewer amendments and get it right the first time, rather than just shotgunning it out there and changing it as you go. But I think the select committees are also going to look at it and may very well start to go back into that habit of omnibus, just because they probably.
What happens if let's say I'm a representative and I have a bill and somehow it gets into this select committee and it gets put onto this omnibus thing, and maybe it even gets changed or anything. Can I pull it off, or is it just there?
If that chairman adds it, remember that the standing committee chair is automatically a member of the select committee. So their opinion is going to be considered and they'll be deferred to, I imagine, I speculate, but they don't have to be necessarily listened to.
Just one person.
Yeah. So I guess to answer your question, if it gets done, it gets done. And really the only thing you can do is, the information systems that we have in the House can allow you to remove your sponsorship. So let's say you're somebody that likes one bill but you don't like another and they get stuck together, I think that you'll be able to remove your co-sponsorship. But if you're a sponsor, you may have a little bit of trouble. And so that's something that you'll have to watch out for and work with the chairman to make sure it doesn't happen to you. So you have to be constantly aware.
Yeah, on opening day, I heard several times that it was important to listen to the people.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like in the committees, they have hearings, but their power is gone. And the select committees that don't have to have hearings, that's where all the big decisions are made.
Well, they are hearings. They're hearings, and the public will be allowed to hear them. I just don't know that they're going to have the same kind of testimony lineup.
Yeah, testimony so you can hear.
Right. So, I'm not fully convinced that this is a good idea or that the process is better. I think it has, it's offering some relief to one of the problems, you know, rules committee being able to, the rules committee used to be, because everything got sent to rules and had to go through rules, it basically was a de facto, like, you know, they kind of set the law, right? I mean, if you can't get through them, you're done. So they were very, that chairmanship was very, very powerful. So they've tried to, you know, neuter that a little bit, but I don't know that the current system is going to, it may be better in some ways, but it may be worse in others. So I think time will certainly tell. And the activism that we do today and you know, is gonna, I think, gonna steer it one way or the other. You can definitely have an impact on how that select committee, you know, how those customs get adopted. So some of those unwritten rules are still unwritten, you know, and so we may very well be able to help guide that discussion a little bit now while things are kind of turbulent. So don't disengage because that presents a challenge.
Are we running out of time? Because I have one more question.
Go for it.
But,
That's good.
so I know that the rules are voted on by the representatives
Yeah.
at the beginning of the year. So if there ever be a situation where the representatives came together and decided that there were better ways to run things, I mean, would it be possible then for them to get those rules on the floor?
Yeah, and the rules just changed significantly. That's why this new committee process exists.
Right.
And so for the last couple of years, there was this kind of undercurrent movement to change the rules because the rules committee was so powerful and so many, it was impacting so many of the majority members whose bills were getting killed because the lobbyists no longer had to work with any of the other committee members. They just went to the rules committee chair. And so if your rules committee chair, you know, has a strong relationship with lobbyist X, Y, or Z, then, you know, then that's the end of the game right there. And so it wasn't a very fair chess match, you know. And so I think that what you're seeing is that is the recognition of that. And those rules, we adopt the rules for the entire General Assembly, and I mean that by the full 2 years, so this session and next. And we generally don't change them midway, but that's not to say it can't happen. But the speaker obviously also has a lot of influence in what those rules say. So it's because John Deal looked at this and identified it as a problem, recognized it as a problem, and is trying to fix it, that it's happening. I don't know if the solutions they presented is one that's the best solution, but it certainly is. It has promise, but it also, that comes with risk as well, because we don't know what the unintended consequences are going to be. I think it would be, I'm happy to talk to you on the sidebar if you want.